Hello everyone and welcome back to English 5. We are going to talk about writing part of this course, and especially today we are going to talk about narrative writing. So writing, English 5, narrative writing. Let's start it. And first of all, let us talk about the purpose of this part of English studies. The purpose of this part is to develop our ability to understand various ways of writing. This ability is important for us to have for both social and professional contexts. To see examples of different texts will help us to both understand how different texts are built and also develop our own ability when it comes to writing. Okay? So narrative writing, so as long as a piece tells a story through a narrative structure, it is narrative writing. And narrative writing is essentially a story writing. It could be fiction or non-fiction. It could be a semi-autobiographical story. It could be historical fiction or even dramatized retelling of actual events. Now go on to types of narrative writing. There are actually multiple ways to write a narrative, and the right kind of narrative for your story or essay depends on your goals for the piece you are writing. And we have four kinds of narrative writing. We have, first of all, linear narrative. We have non-linear narrative. We have viewpoint narrative, and we have descriptive narrative. So first of all, linear narrative. A story's events are told in chronological order. So a linear narrative is a story's events which are told in a chronological order. One specific type of linear narrative you may be familiar with is a quiz narrative. For example, quiz to risk someone or help someone. Another specific type of linear narrative you may have encountered is a historical narrative. A historical narrative follows a linear timeline to tell the story of an actual event or series of events. Some examples of linear narrative. First of all, I'll talk about the structure of this type of narrative. It could be, for example, we can say like Ruben got up, he went out, he met someone, they went to the cinema, there was a bad dog which he shot, and etc. So the plot moves forward in a straight line. Okay, guys? Now, some novels which are famous and use the linear narrative are Henry Fielding's The History of Tom Jones, 1749, Jane Austen's Pride, Prejudice, 1813, Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, 1878. Now go on to the second type of narrative, which is non-linear narrative. And in contrast to a linear narrative, a non-linear narrative presents its story events in non-chronological order. You can emphasize your characters' emotions and perspectives on the events in the story. Some examples of nonlinear narrative, it's Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, 1847. A newcomer to Yorkshire moors asks his housekeeper to tell him the story of his moody neighbor Heathcliff. The housekeeper does so and begins her story some 30 years earlier. Another example is Mark Danielewski's House of Leaves, 20,000, is a story within a story with multiple narrators. The first narrator, Johnny Trowan, discovers a manuscript in a vacant apartment. The manuscript is by the previous inhabitant Zampano and describes a documentary about a house that is bigger on the inside than on the outside. There are several different narrators, including Johnny Zampano and members of the Navidson family who lived in the house. Their narratives take the form of a report, transcripts, records, and notes. Go on to the third kind of narrative, which is a viewpoint narrative. A viewpoint narrative focuses on the narrator's perspective of the story's events. Generally, these kinds of stories are more character-driven than plot-driven. Through a narrative viewpoint, you can explore facets of your protagonist's personality and expose your readers to their thoughts. This kind of narrative is an effective choice for personal essays and stories with perspective and personal growth themes. Some examples of novels using just this technique, which is viewpoint narrative, we have Pride by George Orwell, third person, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Now go on to descriptive narrative. The focus here is on how the setting, characters, and objects look and feel. The goal here is total immersion in the world of the story. So if you are assigned to write a descriptive essay, you will use descriptive narrative techniques to discuss the topic you are covering. This includes using vivid imagery to introduce specific objects and ideas, personification, and similes. Now go on to characteristics of narrative writing. And here are key characteristics you will find in most narratives. So we have a descriptive language, and this type of language evokes feelings rather than directly stating facts. Characters, a story might have just one character, or it can have a huge cast of characters. Among the characters, nearly every narrative needs to have a protagonist, a main character. Another character found in nearly every narrative is the antagonist. And plot. The plot is the series of events that happen in your narrative. So these three parts are the characteristics of narrative writing, which are descriptive language, characters, and plot. Okay? And narrative structure, every narrative, even non-linear narratives, is organized in some way. So no matter how you structure your narrative, it should have three distinct parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay? So it was all for today. Thanks for watching and bye.